So I says to Jen,
I says to Jen one day.
we're going to talk about adjustments. And she looks at me. She's like, what? Okay, I guess.
Yeah, I was like, well, the lawyers do that.
Yeah,
Whatever.
the lawyers do that. So let me just scroll. Sorry for the scrolling window, but this is on our agreement of purchase and sale, Form 100, that every purchase goes through more or less. And what we thought we would do over a handful of segments or shows is just kind of highlight some of the pre-printed clauses that perhaps we tend to take for granted, or we haven't taken the time to really understand them. And last week we got to talk about the insurance clause and a little bit about the inspection clause as well. And today we thought we'd talk about adjustments. So what does that mean? When a home closes, how are things divvied up? Who pays for what on closing day and so forth. So basically what this line or sentence says here, we won't go through it in detail, but the day of closing, all the expenses of the home now belong to the buyer. Doesn't matter if you close at 10 in the morning or at 5:59 in the evening, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
Doesn't
it's
matter.
important to know that, right? It's especially from not land taxes, but property taxes. So if you purchase a home, today, for instance, June 22nd, it closes today, the new owner or you are now responsible for all the taxes that have not been paid yet from June 22nd all the way forward to the end of the year. And we know through adjustments in sometimes that typically we prepay our property taxes, right, Jen?
Yeah, traditionally. Yeah.
Right? Sometimes it's in quarterly installments or monthly installments, or perhaps it's done through your lender or what have you. And typically there's an adjustment where me as the seller, for instance, I've already paid maybe into the month of July another, $200 or $200, $300, $400, $500 or more. And Jen is the buyer. She now has to credit me that money. Right. So even though she bought the home for $10 million, for instance, she now owes me $10,500,000 because of the pre-tax that I've already done. Right.
That's a really great tax rate on that $10 million
Right?
house, Gary.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. I
Yeah.
suppose that example didn't fly so well. I was hoping that to stay under the radar there, Jen.
Sorry. I'm not good at math, but I mean, come on.
Well, the home hasn't sold in 200 years. So that's why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
That's
What did I
why.
buy? Oh,
Yeah,
God.
really. That's really.
I
So,
love it.
but there's some other advantages to your closing date and adjustments, right, Jen? And
Yeah.
and especially from an investment perspective, and that's where I thought I'd take this conversation. And when I mentioned this to Jen, I really got her attention.
You did. I didn't know this. Yeah, I'm actually excited to hear the rest of it.
Yeah.
I only got a brief snippet, so
So what would it feel like or be like? Maybe that's a better way to phrase it. You as a home or a property investor, or you're representing an investor yourself as an agent, and you said to them, if we close on this day and we have a conversation with your mortgage broker and lender, there might be an opportunity where you don't have a full mortgage payment for 2 months, maybe 3. And what if we could show you how to collect almost 3 full months worth of rent before you even make a full mortgage payment? Now
yeah.
you're got the attention of that investor. Now you're standing out from the crowd and looking like the expert, right?
Absolutely.
So I can tell Jen wants to ask me, so how does that work?
Exactly what I want to ask you. I was still trying to figure out how to not have a mortgage payment for 3 months. That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so
Yeah.
there's a few things here, and maybe we can get into more detail on another show. But me as a home investor or property investor, I want to close on the property, for instance, very early in the month. Very early in the month, second, third, fourth, and so forth. And why is that? Well, from a rental standpoint, or perhaps an income standpoint, if I close on the 5th of the month, me as the new buyer, we just talked about adjustments, the tenant, hopefully, has paid their full month rent on the 1st, right?
Right. So you're going to get more of that rent money back.
I'm going to get 20, if it's a 30-day month, I'm going to get 25 days worth of rent, of
Right.
income. and that's going to, the lawyers are going to do that adjustment for me on closing. These are good things, right? And there's different ways to do that as well. When do we typically pay our mortgage payment, Jen? It's not the day of closing, is it?
It's usually the next month.
The next month, right? And it's not a full mortgage payment because there's going to be an interest adjustment there because we haven't had a full month for them to calculate that, right?
Yeah.
There are lenders out there, talk to your mortgage broker and talk to the lender, that they'll even do another mortgage adjustment or interest adjustment for a second month. The other thing that I want to do is I never want to have from a property investment, I never want to have my mortgage payment come out on the first of the month.
Right.
Right. I think we've talked about this in the past. I want it at least on the 5th because that gives me a little bit of leeway. If a tenant might be late on a payment or so forth, I can always make sure I have the appropriate funds in the bank account. Right. So if I've received 25 days of income, then I receive on the 1st, at the very least, another full income on the property. And if I do have to make my first interest payment on, which is month 2, right, on the 5th, I have almost 2 full months of rent before that happens.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense.
It is a great way to just, it's amazing how much a closing date can affect your monthly income.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially with an income property, right? Like, I mean, I've never had it explained to me or even been taught that. So that was kind of, my mind is a little bit blown right now, but I mean, I love being able to have that conversation with clients and explain that to them or be strategic. Sometimes the closing date can be arbitrary. It's a great reason to have a strategic conversation around that date, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Many people will just throw in a date that's just whatever. Hey, the 17th is my favorite number.
Yeah.
Like you might loss out on a few $100s just because it's your favorite number, right?
Yeah.
Or more.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially the bigger revenue buildings. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And even from a tax reimbursement scenario, if we take out the investment of it, if you close earlier in the month, then you pay back arguably less taxes because you might save those 20 or 25 or 27 days. I mean, it would be minuscule, but you know, it might matter. It might save you $100 or $200 or whatever that might look like.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously the higher the income on that property, the more money that you're going to have come in at the very least. And that is definitely a strategy that I would teach my investors, a strategy that I was always I would teach our investment workshops, and every time I'd bring it up, I could see people's minds just like, hang on a second, what just happened?
Yeah.
And when we're talking about some properties that have $4,000 or $5,000 a month or more in income, I was able to show them how to create, $10,000, $12,000 of income before they had their first big mortgage payment. And that can mean a lot to a lot of people because we always talk about having, a reserve fund or a slush fund for those rainy days.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a huge safety net right out the gate, right? That you maybe wouldn't have otherwise. So there's a huge value add to that for sure.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah. So if you have questions around that, do reach out to us. There's much more we can get into detail on that. And maybe we turn one of these episodes into a full investment talk on some of those strategies that perhaps you just never thought about before. And it's a really unique strategy to obviously, shore up the bank account a little bit, right? Before you have anything major expenses.
Any costs coming out. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It also buys you time if you don't get paid, right? Like if that tenant doesn't pay the rent, then you have a little window of time before you owe something to kind of figure out what's going on or get that problem resolved, which is also nice because it can be nerve-wracking at the beginning to see if the tenant's going to pay on time, be a good tenant, or if you're going to have an issue, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think we might have to do an investment segment. Stacey's saying yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots there too. And in fact, going forward, I know into the fall and much farther than that, we've been talking a lot more about generating wealth, not only for our agents, but that in turn is going to help their clients generate wealth. And the more that Jen, the more we can have these types of conversations, the more people it affects, right? That's the cool thing with stuff like this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The more people we can educate, the more people they educate, and so on, right? And you get that butterfly effect, which is kind of why we do what we do, right? To make sure people know how to get the best out of it and have the best scenario possible. So, yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, I can tell you, Stacy, tomorrow at a very, very high level, I'm moving my hands above the screen, very high level. I'm going to, at our team meeting, I'm going to go over my investment pro forma that I would use to analyze investment properties. Now that it'll be at a very high level and it'll be available for download, but we can certainly have a much deeper conversation with that going forward. We haven't had that conversation in a while, as I thought it was a good time to bring that back.
Yeah.
And again, it's standing out from the crowd and being, providing your clients with pretty amazing information too on how you educate them.